Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the L. Ron Hubbard Theater in Hollywood, California. Tonight we present a live broadcast of the Golden Age Radio Hour featuring L. Ron Hubbard's detective story, Mouthpiece. In the first half of the 20th century, cities like New York seemed to split into two strata, the elite and the underworld. Among the elite were a class of people, notably lawyers who manipulated the law, for the underworld who just broke it. A lawyer who helped a criminal was known as a mouthpiece. It had been a long time since Matt Lawrence had stood upon the corner of a city street, and he found that the sound of traffic, that nerve-tearing clamor of bells, horns, motors, and flat-wheeled streetcars was a foreign and intolerable thing. For 3 years he had worked in a silent desert, building a mammoth power dam. The loudest noise had been a coyote's howl at midnight. He did not know that his dusty boots and battered Stetson made him conspicuous. New buildings, odd cars, new parks. He caught himself wondering if he, the son of Lawrence, the gangster, had ever belonged to this world of sound and steel. Then he saw the name of a building across the street and reverted to his mission. His leather heels clanged in the marble corridor, and he swung back the door marked C.G. Swartz, Attorney at Law. With his eyes fixed on a man who sat at an ornate desk in the second room, Lawrence walked on through to come to a deliberate stop beside the desk. Behind a scattered array of papers which lapped over the edges of an old-fashioned sand ink blotting box, Swartz looked up, a startled expression attempted to hide in his dark eyes.
I did not expect you to...
No, you probably didn't. Why the hell didn't you write me that Dad was dead?
His poise regained, Swartz offered a hand, which Matt shook dubiously.
I didn't think it was necessary, Mr. Lawrence, and besides, telegrams cost money.
Sure, they cost money. Why so careful about Dad's finances all of a sudden? You didn't used to worry about it. I remember one case where...
Now. You don't fully understand. Didn't you read the letter I sent you?
Why, I guess I did. What's that got to do with it?
My boy, your father died penniless. There was neither will nor estate.
What? At last report, Swartz, he had a cool $1 million sacked away. That's a hell of a wad of fade. Now, if Dad died broke, he died broke. I'd like to know why. But what I really want to know is every detail of his dying. I don't want news talk. I want facts. And you got 'em. You always got 'em. Now, Dad paid you out in dough, 6 figures, many a time. And I guess it still ought to buy the info.
As for your father's fortune, I only know that he invested heavily in worthless securities. He was an impulsive man, and though I often attempted to advise him, he would never listen to me.
Probably not. I don't blame him. Now, I want to know what happened.
You can never quite tell in this game, Mr. Lawrence. You know that.
Quit stalling. Come on, Swartz. Quit stalling.
Swartz made a tent of his fat fingers and then moved them up to tug at his lower lip, his eyes warily regarding Matt.
All right, I'll tell you. Rat-Face O'Connell was on his trail. Your father had the dying and cleaning protection racket of this town, and Rat-Face and his boys didn't like it. So, one night they went up to your father's apartment, shot down the guards, and took Lawrence for a ride. That's the story.
Matt probed into the man's face as though searching for flaws.
Rat-faced O'Connell, huh?
He looked musingly into the palm of his hand as if it were a textbook.
Rat-faced O'Connell. All right. Where's he hang around?
Oh, no, no.
Oh, yes, yes. Now, where can I find him now?
No,
Tonight.
but it's suicide, Mr. Lawrence. I can't let you do it.
He whipped out a handkerchief and mopped at his brow as though the idea had turned the room into a furnace.
You'd better get out and leave this thing alone.
I suppose I'm a yellow belly? Like the rest of you guys, huh?
Matt threw a twisted smile at Swartz.
Well, you're wrong. If you think anybody can bump my dad and then get off scot-free, oh, you're cockeyed as hell.
His square jaw jutted out and his eyes were the size of match heads.
I'm looking to get Mr. Ratface and make him talk. Talk. Get me? He'll burn for that night's work, or by God, I'll take him to hell with me.
Swartz fanned himself with the silk, leaning back in his chair. It was as though he had cooled his legal brain, for suddenly he crouched forward, confidential and wise.
How much money have you got, Mr. Lawrence?
Oh, I see. I gotta pay for it.
No, you haven't. I'm going to give you the address. The dough is for a couple of your father's gorillas to go with you. You remember them, Petey and Blake?
Matt sought for the answer in his palm, and after several moments of concentrated searching, he looked up.
All right. I got $500. Well, that will cover Petey, Blake, and the car. You're gonna lend me a gun.
Fine. I'll send them around at 7 to your hotel. Where are you stopping?
I guess the Savoy is as good as any. Now, where are my dad's papers? I want to read them over and find out what the score was.
Swartz gave Matt a sad stare.
The papers were all taken by O'Connell and his boys. He didn't leave anything with me, ever.
Matt frowned, and then walked to the door, placing his huge hand on the knob.
Yeah, I'll be back to see you tomorrow, Swartz. If I live to tell the yarn.
Sharply at 7, a black sedan stood courteously at the entrance of the Savoy Hotel, 2 men in the front seat. Matt Lawrence loomed out of the lighted doorway, towering over the gilt-frogged doorman, and looked into the car. He saw Petey first.
Hello, Petey. Hello, Blake.
Petey was mostly chest, and his head resembled nothing so much as a shoebox sunk into his torso. Buttons for eyes and a ragged knife gash for a mouth. Blake was oily and sleek, his hair glistening more than his patent leather shoes, and his black eyes shinier than neither. They gave Matt a heartless hello and glanced at each other.
Hello.
Get him back, Muggs. I'm driving.
Grudgingly, shying away from the bright lights of the entrance as though they stung Petey and Blake, they squirmed out and slunk into the back seat. Matt crumped the gears and stabbed the headlights out into the blur of traffic.
Where we go?
Petey leaned forward, his voice rasping like a saw in mahogany.
Hey, head straight out this street, Bo. I'll put you wise to the times.
He glanced at Blake before he sat back, and Blake nodded, his lips sliding into a knowing smile, as though well-oiled. With a turn here and a curve there, the sedan went on through the glaring city until the house windows were more dimly lighted, and the houses themselves seemed to exude darkness. Matt found it hard to distinguish streets from alleys.
Hey, Blake. Where's the gun Swartz sent?
Blake slid an automatic pistol across the rear seat. Matt looked at the blue glint, and then shoved the weapon into his coat to slip out the clip to find that it was fully loaded.
Thanks.
He glanced up into the rearview mirror.
Say, what the hell are you smiling about?
Things. Oh, you turned down this next one.
Suddenly uncomfortable, Matt turned the designated corner and found that he was leaving the last of the houses behind him. He humped over the wheel, speeding up.
Hey, say, Petey, were you in at Dad's finish?
Leaning forward, Petey obliged.
No, I arrived about 10 minutes afterwards. This rat-face O'Connell had cleared out most of the papers and all the loose jack. Oh, I've been itching to get my mitts on him ever since.
He pointed with a dirty finger.
Oh, you turn down that next road. There, the little one.
Okay.
Matt did as he was directed.
This bird sure lives a hell of a ways out, doesn't he? Listen, I'm gonna drive right up to the front of the house. Now, you two birds circle around back. Try to get in that way. After that, we'll see what we see. Get me?
Sure.
If I'm right, this rat face is a rotten shot. And I want him alive. You get that? Alive. He's gonna burn, see?
Sure.
Hey, say,
Matt sat up suddenly and slowed down.
this is a city dump.
Sure. Now slow down and stop.
He pressed a gat into Matt's ear where it bored viciously.
Oh, you didn't know it, but you was taking yourself for a ride.
Matt stiffened, involuntarily reaching for the foot brake. The gun in his ear was a round, hard snarl. Then, still moving at 30 miles an hour, he stamped down on the gas.
Yeah? Well, Petey, if you blow me to hell now, you're going along too.
And slow down! You'll kill all of us!
Petey drew the pistol away from Matt's head, staring beadily at the treacherous, curving road over which they were hurtling.
Jeez, quit for God's sakes!
Matt's face was savage. He jerked the car around the twisting turns. The headlights clashed on cans and broken glass, throwing themselves over the edge of a 20-foot drop to the right of the car. Petey was frozen with terror as he watched that bank full of darkness. He knew that if he shot Matt then and there, he could never snatch the wheel in time to save the car and his own hide. Watching the cans and glass ahead of them, Matt's left hand sneaked away from the wheel and his fingers closed over the door hatch. Holding his breath, he saw a left turn dart around head. With a lunge, he twisted the car wheel to the right and sprang out and away, rolling on the sharp, scorching earth. The sedan careened, flopped over to the right. A brittle crunch was followed by splintering glass and a scream.
Ah!
Before the crash had ceased to echo, Matt was on his feet, lunging toward the embankment after the car, his automatic almost engulfed in his huge hand. Matt's jaw was thrust out and a smile pulled up at one corner of his mouth. Unthinkingly, he stood directly in the beam from the headlight. Flame spurted from one side of the car, and lead whispered past Matt's hand. A second flash came from the right. Coolly, Matt brought up the pistol and sighted on a saffron ribbon of light below. He squeezed the trigger with marksman-like perfection, but the hammer clicked emptily.
Hell?
Pulling back the slide for a second try, the same result snicked in his ears. He started to throw the gun to one side and then changed his mind, placing it carefully in his pocket. He crawled out of the range of the lights and then slipped over the embankment to slide silently down to the car's level. Now in back of it, he could see a silhouette in the headlight's glare and recognized Petey, tensed on one elbow, his gun trained on the bank above. For a full minute, Matt lay still, looking at Petey, debating whether or not to use his gun butt for a sap. Creeping forward, he came up beside Petey, almost level with his shoulder. Petey heard the rustling sound of cloth against cinders and whispered out of the corner of his mouth,
Did we hit him, Blake?
Nope.
He grabbed Petey by the scruff of the neck and jerked him upright, bringing a sledgehammer fist viciously into his face.
No, you didn't.
What was that?
Called Blake from the other side of the car.
What'd you say?
Matt fumbled around until he found Petey's automatic. He grasped it tightly before standing up.
You had better toss away that toy you're holding and holler uncle.
Lead smashed through the car from the other side, winding away across the city dump, and Lead went back through 3 times to stop abruptly, eliciting a shrill scream. Matt carefully snapped on the pistol safety catch and then walked over to the embankment. By the car's light, he found a piece of rusty iron wire in one of the ashes. He pulled it up to him amid a clatter and crunch of rusty tin cans, and then strode back to the car. Petey received the first treatment, and soon he was wired tightly, propped against the front bumper of the sedan. His head wearily dropped on his chest. As Blake was secured, he moaned aloud.
Oh, shut up. You aren't hurt. Those 2 punctures won't do any more than let some of the grease out of you.
He gave the wire a final twist and stood back to appreciate his handiwork. P came to with a yell and a squirm, which subsided instantly as he saw the bulk of Matt squatting on his heels before him.
Now, that the congregation is assembled, boys, we might as well hold a confession. They tell me it's good for the soul, though that probably leaves you 2 out. I want the lowdown on the higher-ups.
Eyes stubbornly glared at him. 2 sets of twitching lips tried to be firm and unrelenting.
So, you won't talk? Well, there's plenty of time.
He took the automatic, which Petey had given him earlier in the evening, and extracted a cartridge from it. Listening intently, he shook the shell close to his ear and grunted. With a penknife and a hard cinder, he carefully extracted the steel jacket of lead and poured the contents of the shell in his hand.
Sand.
Matt jiggled his hand, looking at the white particles.
Now, I wonder what bright boy thought that up.
He found Blake's pistol by the car, and then, with his right hand and Petey's in his left, he backed away in the headlight's glare, hefting the 2 weapons suggestively.
You're sure that you don't want to talk?
Silence came from the bumper in spite of the uneasy squirming.
Well, I haven't had any target practice for some time.
Matt backed away until he was well up on the embankment, carefully sighting on the first number of the license plate between the 2 gunmen. Matt squeezed the trigger, expertly puncturing the numeral.
Now, we'll skip a number, and then another. And the next one catches Petey between the eyes. Now that leaves Blake to talk. If he doesn't want to, I go back the way I came and take off each of Blake's ears.
He raised his left hand and ventilated the designated numeral. Just as he was bringing down his right gun, Petey wailed,
I'll talk! I'll squeal, honest to God, I'll talk. Don't shoot me.
Matt sat down in front of him, bending an attentive ear to Petey's babble.
Ratface found out about it. He's got plenty on me. And he said if I didn't, he'd squawk to the bulls. I didn't want to drill you, honestly, I didn't, but he made me. He told me to give you that phony gun in case you got suspicious.
Petey rambled on with the details. Matt got to his feet and bound up the 2 bullet holes in Blake's arm and side. He fixed the wire so that it held the 2 gunmen together and left long trailing ends. Taking the 2 wires in his right hand and a gun in his left, Matt said,
Giddy up!
Although it was a long walk back to the edge of town, Matt's stride was as strong as ever when the first lamppost was reached. But Petey and Blake, they dragged woeful heels as though every step was the last. A taxi came to their rescue and whirred through town toward a residential section. Stately lawns sloped primly back toward overbearing mansions. The huge cars were parked at the curb. When the taxi braked before an especially imposing home, Matt herded his 2 wards to the sidewalk where they drooped, paid the driver, and marched down a perfectly landscaped expanse, coming to a halt before the castle-like door. Listening to the sound of an orchestra inside, Matt read C.G. Swartz on the door plate and then rang the doorbell. The butler who answered was politely amazed at the spectacle on the veranda.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, but Mr. Swartz is giving a party and no visitors are to be admitted.
Tough.
And the butler found himself sprawled on the floor, lights spinning above him. Swartz's party was the height of elegance. Men who were unmistakably judges and politicians, and women who were undoubtedly snobbish, swirled about to the tune of a 12-piece orchestra. Matt lifted one eyebrow at the colorful sight and then looked about him. A secure coat hook caught and held his attention. He twisted his 2 wires together into a loop to hoist his prisoners off the floor and leave them dangling in midair. Nonchalantly oblivious of his laced boots and generally second-hand condition, Matt stepped into the ballroom. Grimly, he looked about, attempting to single out Swartz. A sudden motion caught Matt's attention, and he saw Swartz tipping forward as though he was about to fall. The hairless head was quivering with surprise, and the 2 black eyes were 2 beads of terror. Matt looked across the room at Swartz, his square face sliding into a cool, cold smile.
Good evening, Mr. Swartz.
And with long, effortless slides and strides, his leather heels crashing through the stillness of the room, not minding disdainful glances, Matt came close to Swartz.
Sorry to trouble you, Swartz, but I thought you'd like to know that Petey squealed.
His tone was impersonal, his eyes watchful. The shiny face turned yellow, then dead white, and Swartz tottered back, his hand darted to his hip, and terror shone in his eyes. Animal terror, which gave no thought to anything but the impulse to kill. Matt's hand shot out and caught the wrist. Doubling the arm back with a savage jerk, Matt's voice crashed through the room like a cannon shot.
You're clever, Mouthpiece, but just not clever enough. When you shot Dad, you thought that I'd clear out, didn't you? Oh, you didn't count on me coming back, did you?
He wrenched the arm again, and beads of sweat darted out against the lawyer's gray forehead. Men in evening clothes were trying to pull at Matt's arms, trying to pry him away from Swartz. Voices were blended in an excited, hysterical roar. Matt whipped about, still holding Swartz, and brushing away the men as though they were made of paper.
Get back! This is my party!
The sheer strength of his voice seemed physical, and the crowd swept away, starting and staring once more silent. Turning to Swartz, his eyes deadly, Matt snapped.
Talk, Mouthpiece. Go on and talk. You got plenty to tell, and no doubt your friends will want to hear about it.
With a slow smile, he reached into his pocket and brought forth a sheaf of papers, which he crackled in front of Swartz.
You see these? Well, they're signed confessions by your little pals, Petey and Blake. They squealed, see? The Tates turned evidence. And I got it here in black and white that it was your bullet which knocked off my dad.
No, it's a lie. It's a lie. They did it for me. They did it, and I can prove it. I had a party that night, and anybody will tell you I didn't do it. I didn't. Hear me? I didn't.
The silence of the room deepened. Swartz stared mildly about, suddenly realizing what he'd done. His knees started to crumple under him, and his head rolled forward. But Matt grabbed the front of his coat and held him up, shaking him. Matt's words whipped and lashed about Swartz.
You had me taken for a ride tonight. You gave me a dud gun, planted your gorillas on me, sent me after a right guy. Now, what do you got to say?
He shook the lawyer savagely, holding the dangling feet clear off the floor.
Where's the cash you stole from my dad?
Swartz gurgled, looked up, beaten, whipped.
All right, Lawrence. All right.
His voice was dead, and his eyes were glued to the papers Matt still held before him.
I'll talk.
He wailed suddenly.
I'll talk. But don't shake me. Set me down.
Talk.
The key's in my pocket. The key to the safe deposit box at the First National. It's all there. Every penny of it is there.
Your witnesses.
Matt said to the crowd, dropping Swartz to the yellow hardwood floor. He ransacked the pockets of the lawyer's dress suit and brought to light a ring of keys.
Which one?
That one.
As Matt extracted the designated key from the ring, a tall, dignified gentleman with white hair tapped him on the shoulder.
I'm Judge Holloway. I can act in an official capacity. You have reference to the Lawrence murder. Is that right?
Yes. I got the goods on Swartz and those two lads outside. They tried to bump me tonight.
With a glance at Swartz, Holloway drew Matt to one side.
You better give me those confessions.
What confessions?
Matt was puzzled for an instant and then grinned, looking down at the sheaf in his hand.
Oh, these. These aren't anything. They're just some estimates for mules to haul dirt out at the power project.
But how did you know that Swartz was guilty?
Matt grinned and pulled out the automatic, which Petey had given him.
Now, Swartz gave me this through a gangster named Petey. Now, I thought he'd try and pull some rough stuff and use it. Now, as long as I'd asked for it, he gave it to me.
He slipped a cartridge out of the clip and quickly bit the lead out of the brass shell with his teeth to pour white sand in his palm.
Now, he had to give me dud cartridges, and he was afraid I would investigate too soon. You see this white sand in my palm? Well, Petey claimed that another mobster bribed him to plant this gun on me and take me for a ride. But the white sand says differently. Have you noticed that old-fashioned sand blotting box on Swartz's desk?
Yes.
Well, this is the same kind of sand.
You don't say.
Matt bounced it in his hand.
If my mineralogy doesn't tell me wrong, it's identical. And there's very little in this part of the world. Then, too, see that black grain there?
Yes.
That's ink.
Oh. Then he replaced the powder in the cartridges with the sand from the box on his desk. Well, and well. But the evidence isn't necessary. I've got enough on him to bring him to trial. I better take him into custody. Now, drop around the station tomorrow and we'll get everything straight.
Matt juggled the mound of sand in his palm, and he carefully pocketed the faked bullets for future evidence. He gave the room a brief sweep with smiling eyes, and then slowly made his way out into the hall where Petey and Blake still dangled from the coat hooks. Grinning now in appreciation of the joke, Matt stopped before them. He presented the little white mound in his palm, besides which he had placed the key to the safety deposit box, which held a fortune.
You know, it takes sand to get along in this world. But your boss in there had just a little too much.
And Petey and Blake, with their hard, emotionless eyes, watched him saunter out through the ornate doorway, back to a world where buzzards flew, and coyotes howled, and wheels were waiting to be turned in the construction of a mammoth power dam.